Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tyler and this is going to be my January wrap up. I've actually talked about quite a lot of what I've read this month already, so I'm going to try and link those videos if I can figure out how to do the cards while I talk about them. So this video is going to be probably relatively short, just because I have talked about most of these things already. But I wanted to wrap up stuff anyways. So I have read 9 books this month, which I think is pretty decent. You know what? Let me check my Goodreads information real quick. According to Goodreads, I'm 1 book ahead of schedule, which is good. I had actually built kind of a little bit of a buffer at the beginning of the month, and I definitely needed it because things slowed down at the end after the little bit of a reading slump I talked about in last week's video. So I read 9 books. I DNF'd 3 books, which I also talked about in that book slump video. And my average was I took 4.5 days to read a book, which makes sense. The first half of the month I was reading books in 3 days because I read a bunch of short books and I read Hunger Games, which also are books I have read before and are not that difficult to read. And then I hit Mockingjay and things really slowed down from there. So 4.5 days per book on average. And my average rating was 3.5 stars, which again also makes sense. There was some 5 stars that I had. The 5 stars I read this month were 3 Girls from Bronzeville, and Olympus. Those were my 5 stars this month. I guess I don't know how to decide which one was my favorite read this month, because Olympus was just such an incredible experience from like a teenage girl perspective. 3 Girls from Bronzeville was also a very emotional read for me, so I don't know. I liked them both. And then, what was my worst read? Mockingjay was my worst read. I gave that 2 stars. Oh, I actually gave Year of the Hare 2 stars too. But Mockingjay was by far the worst read this month, just because I thought it was just a miserable experience. I'll just read the books that I have read this month. I'll give you the titles, and I will try and give a short summary, but like I've said, I've talked about a vast majority of these books already, so we'll see how that goes. So I read The Year of the Hare by Arto Pasilina, a Finnish book about a man who changes his life after he injures a hare, basically, and travels around the Finnish countryside. 3 Girls from Bronzeville, memoir by Dawn Turner. I listened to that audiobook. Touches on race, incarceration, substance abuse. Really enjoyed it. I had a lot of trouble putting my thoughts and feelings into words in the first week of January wrap-up video I did. Then I read all 3 Hunger Games books. The first 2 I enjoyed. The third one, like I said, I did not have fun reading. I also talked about how much I hated Mockingjay in the book slump video, and I also talked about Olympus in that book slump video. It is a webcomic that is a retelling of Persephone and Hades, the story of Persephone and Hades. There is some sexual assault that goes on as part of like kind of the foundation of this retelling, that I do not believe happens in the original Greek myths, but I really enjoyed it. I did finally start the 2nd season. I'm reading it 1 episode per day, trying to like savor it, and then once I catch up, I'll mark that season read on Goodreads. Then I listened to another memoir nonfiction called American Baby, A Mother, a Child, and the Shadow History of Adoption by Gabrielle Glazer. I gave that 4 stars. I really liked it. It's mostly about the mother who was forced to give her son up for adoption, but it also talks about the son's life, what happened to his life after he was given up for adoption, and it touches on just like the shadiness of the adoption industrial complex, and it's not good. The book is good. The practices are not good. I have to say this book made me very uncomfortable in a lot of ways, and not necessarily in a bad way. As a person who values reproductive rights, who is child-free by choice and has some like pregnancy phobia stuff, this, I don't know, it just brought up a lot of weird emotions and things that made me uncomfortable. I don't know, it was a very valuable read. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. For me personally, it really highlighted the importance of protecting reproductive rights, maintaining access to abortion for people who are pregnant and don't want to be pregnant. And so while this really focuses on how the system harms both the person who gave birth and the person who was birthed, there are other things to also take from it, you know? Like, it doesn't like go in depth about abortion, but that's another option, you know? And so that's just something that I was thinking about while listening to this book. Then I finished The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. I read the first half, and I will say it was probably a pretty decent book to like kind of get me out of my book slump. Like, I really wasn't that invested in this book. I gave it 3 stars. And by halfway point, I was ready to use my eyes to read something else. So then I listened to the back half in audio form, which I don't usually do, but I like wanted to finish the story, but like I wasn't that invested in the story. So like if I missed something while listening to it, I wasn't like devastated. It is about a blue woman from Kentucky, like the tribulations she goes through. She delivers books in these rural areas of Kentucky, and there's just like things that happen that she has to deal with, basically. People seem to have loved this book based on the Goodreads reviews. I didn't really care about any of the characters or any of the things that were happening in this book, but it wasn't like badly written or anything like that. I just didn't care. And I mean, it makes sense. Historical fiction, I have said before, is not really my cup of tea, but it was decent enough to kind of help me, you know, jog my reading abilities again. And then I read Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I believe this is a relatively controversial book. It's been on my TBR for a while, and I had apparently bought it as a Google Book ebook like a year ago and completely forgot about it. I don't know why I didn't read it when I bought it, but I rediscovered it on accident, and I was like, oh, this has been on my TBR for a while. I should just read this. So I read it, and I gave it 3 stars. I don't think it was badly written or anything like that. Honestly, I feel like this book has really solidified for me that I am just not into thrillers anymore. I almost DNF'd it, to be quite honest, at the beginning, because it's told by 3 narrators. And the one narrator I liked the most is the father of this missing girl. He's like writing letters or journal entries to one of the missing girls, his daughter. And then the 2 main narrators are 2 women named Claire and Lydia. And it isn't immediately clear how these narrators are connected. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I like multiple narrators anymore. And I'm going to be really annoyed if this reveal for how they're connected isn't good. Because I really only liked the dad's narration. But about 75 pages in, it reveals the connection. And I had a friend who actually like spoiled the book for herself, and I was just like talking to her about the book. And apparently the relationship between these girls is mentioned in some of the summaries. I personally tend to not read summaries of thrillers before I read them, or like I don't commit them to memory, and I definitely don't read them right before I pick up the book to read, because I'm like, I want the full experience. But I really did wish that I knew how they were connected from the start. So I regret not reading the summary before, because I spent 60 pages of being like waffling and dreading like what this relationship was going to be, when it wasn't really meant to be a reveal in the first place, if you know what I mean. I have seen that some people have like thought of this as torture porn. I personally didn't read it that way. Like, the things that happen in this book are graphic. There are some graphic things that happen in this book, but it didn't feel to me personally like it was being done solely for the shock value, or just to do it. Like, it did feel like it was connected to the story, and like it moved the story along. It didn't feel gratuitous just to be gratuitous. But I mean, it definitely gets kind of graphic in there, especially in the back half. Like, there's like one point in, I think, the first like 100 pages where it's like all of a sudden it took like a turn, and you're like, oh my God, that was graphic. I was not expecting that right then. And then there's really not much between that and then like the last 100 pages where you get quite a bit more of it. So that isn't necessarily the reason I didn't vibe with this. I think I am just kind of done with thrillers. I think this really sealed the deal for me that I'm not reaching for or enjoying thrillers anymore. I used to be very into true crime, and I read a lot of like nonfiction true crime. I listened to a lot of true crime podcasts. I read a lot of thrillers, kind of like on those same topics. And in the last year and a half or so, I have really significantly curtailed the true crime I consume. I used to be subscribed to like true crime YouTube channels and podcasts, and I have pretty much removed like 95% of that from my media consumption diet. I felt like it was over-valorizing police in a way that was starting to make me uncomfortable. Hi, I just want to pop in here real quick because I found my use of the word valorizing to be odd. But what I was trying to get at was I found a lot of true crime was unquestioningly accepting of the police and prosecution narratives of most cases, while also demonizing the defense lawyers, which I found to be very off-putting. We know that innocent people have been put behind bars through bad policing, also bad prosecution tactics, keeping things from defense lawyers, etc. Those narratives need to be questioned. And I do not like the full-throated demonizing of defense lawyers, because they are a very important part of the criminal justice system to attempt to keep innocent people out of prison. It does not matter if they are working for guilty or innocent people. They are important. It is a right afforded to us through the Constitution. I do not like the demonizing of defense lawyers. So I was seeing a lot of that especially like in the YouTube true crime sphere, that I really, truly did not like. And that is what made me stop and question what I was consuming. I felt like the victims were like their stories were becoming like commodified almost, like they were stories to entertain me instead of being a tragic thing that happened to real people. And so I randomly was like, okay, I'm gonna take a month off from true crime. I'm just not gonna listen to it. And then from there, purposefully added back certain things. So the things I consume now are more, they have like a purpose almost. So the story is, you know, talking about false confessions, or it is pointing out a problem in the criminal justice system. It is about capitalism. Couldn't take stories about women being raped and murdered anymore. Like, I just couldn't do it. And I think that's kind of where I'm falling into thrillers too. Like, I can't do it anymore. Like, it's not entertaining to me. I don't know. I just think I'm over it. And this isn't like a judgment on anyone who still enjoys these things. It's just kind of where I'm personally at. Like, it's not something I find entertaining anymore. I don't know. Like, I don't like detective mysteries either, but I like a mystery. So I don't really know where to go from here. I think that's probably part of the reason I'm gravitating towards horror, because it tends to be more fantastical. It's not, while I like it to be realistic or grounded in reality, by nature of what most horror is, it's more fantastical. So like the horror book I read last year, The Troop, that's like body horror. So it was like based in reality, like it was our world, but it was a gross like science fiction body horror sort of deal. And it had like that multimedia thing in it too that I like. And you know, House of Leaves is technically sort of a horror too, and that is kind of like a fantastical thing where the horror is like the unknown in the house, and it's not like real people being evil to other real people. And so I think that's part of the reason I'm gravitating towards horror. I'm not going to take every thriller that's still on my TBR off my TBR or anything, but I'm really just not going to be prioritizing them anymore. Maybe I'll pick one up if like nothing else is available at the library or something. So yeah, this book really just, you know, kind of put that into perspective for me, that it's just like not the type of story I enjoy anymore. You know, I enjoyed them at some point in my life, and you know, it's fine to let them go. There was nothing really that like upset me that I didn't like, besides it just being like not a story that grabs me or interests me anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And those were all the books I read this month. So I am in the middle of 2 books right now. I don't think I'm going to talk about them right now, so I can talk about them in a different video and not be constantly repeating myself. So I did buy a few books this month. I've already talked about Battle Royale. I still haven't started this. I'm kind of hoping after I finish one of the books I'm in the middle of, I'll start this, because now I'm kind of getting my groove back and I feel like I might be able to dive into this. I also bought Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I really loved The Warmth of Other Suns. So I bought this from not the library. I bought this from the local bookstore a couple weeks ago, and I haven't touched on it yet. I haven't started it yet because I've just been listening to memoir nonfiction, but hopefully I'll get a chance to read this Cast this month. I just haven't gotten around to starting it yet. That is my reading month. I do seem to be getting back kind of into the groove of things. So that's what I read this month. I do seem to be getting kind of back into the groove of things, so hopefully I'll have another good reading month next month, although it's a short month, so I probably won't read as many books. That's all for now. I'll talk to y'all later, and I'll see you next week. Bye!